There is an updated program of this workshop, which I hope is being printed. And the session is divided into, the workshop is divided into two sessions. The morning session, which is starting right now, features two lectures. One is titled Language in Danger, Why Care? The second is on the vitality of Cameroonian languages. The afternoon session will feature two more talks, and my colleague Dr. Makaso will be chairing this session and will expand more on this in due course. Before I proceed to introduce our special guest for this workshop, let me say a couple of introductory remarks. As we are all aware of, Cameroon is a major hub of language diversity. I will not venture into any figure, as there are competing counts. But whatever the case, it is undoubtable that Cameroon is blessed or cursed, depending on which end you take it, with language diversity. Indeed, it is the second most diverse country in terms of multilingualism in Africa, just after Nigeria. How do we cope with this diversity? Do we see it as a curse and give up our ancestors' language for more marketable ones? Do we see language diversity as a threat to national unity, as has sometimes been advocated? Or do we care for our languages, for our language heritage, and commit ourselves for their survival and their passing over to future generations? I am sure the answer for all of us present here is yes. And I'm sure we are on the right side of history. But how do we tackle this issue of language revitalization? What is it at all? What does it entail? Well, all these questions, I'm sure, will find right answers from the right persons here today. One of them is our first speaker for this morning session. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure and pride to now introduce to you Professor Lenore Grenoble from the University of Chicago. Professor Grenoble is the current chair of the Department of Linguistics at the University of Chicago. She graduated with a PhD in Linguistics from the University of Southern California, Berkeley, in 1986. She is a John Matthews Manley Distinguished Service Professor. She has been a Carl Darlingberg Professor between 2007 and 2014. She's been visiting professors in quite every serious university in the world, including University of Harvard and many, many, many more. Before coming to Cameroon, she was just from Russia. And prior to this, she had been in Australia, in France, and I'm certainly forgetting. Professor Grenoble research focuses on language use as socially anchored and contextually embedded. She specializes in the fields of language contact, endangerment, and revitalization, including language documentation, of course. She also has an interest for discourse and conversation analysis. Grenoble's current work follows several trajectories and involves a number of major projects. I will name four very quickly. One, the investigation of contact-induced morphosyntactic change with focus on research on the influence of Russian on languages spoken in Eurasia, and the other focus on a contact variety of Russian historically spoken in Odessa. Two, spatial semantics Deixis and Landscape Linguistics in Inuit in Greenland. 3. Multimodality in Russian grammar in interaction. And 4. The study of verbal gestures in languages of West Africa and beyond. All of these are large, ongoing projects that involve documentation of language in its cultural context and directly involve graduate students. In addition, some of her time is devoted to the study of social linguistics, aspects of language vitality, shift and revitalization, including collaboration with indigenous communities, in particular in the Arctic. Professor Grenoble has authored close to 100 articles, 11 books. She has presented in more than 200 occasions, including keynote address. So, ladies and gentlemen, I will not venture further. One thing I know for sure is that we are very lucky to have her today. And I'm very, very, very thankful for having accepted Cerdotola invitation. So I will leave the floor now to Professor Grenoble, ladies and gentlemen, for our talk on language endangerment. Oh, what's the title again?
Oh, YCare.
Okay, language endangerment definitions and ideologies. YCare. It was not exactly what I had in mind. I'm sorry. Sorry to have the floor, Professor. Thank you very much.
Very much. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, and thank you all for coming. Thank you for the hospitality from Cerdotola. I appreciate. Can you hear me okay? Yes. If I speak too quickly, let me know. When I get nervous, I speak really quickly, and nobody can understand me. I am going to talk for about an hour, maybe with some time for questions, and if I don't leave enough time, I hope we can talk over the break. My student Betsy is in the back corner, and so she will also be very happy to talk to all of you. And then this afternoon I will be giving a second talk focusing more on language revitalization. The two talks go together. This morning I thought since it's early and it is the vacation, I thought I would ease into things and we will do some fun things this morning. This morning's talk is a little more fun. I have a lot of videos. I do want to thank all of my funders. I'm giving a broad view this morning of language endangerment in the world, and a lot of this is based on my research. I am funded by the University of Chicago, by the National Science Foundation. I have been working in the Arctic. In general, I like to work in cold climates. I have a hard time with the heat, so we'll see how I do in Cameroon. And I have worked with a large number of speakers. I also really would like to thank Cerdotola for their wonderful hospitality, this wonderful opportunity to meet with you all, to get to know you. We are beginning collaborations, and I am very much looking forward to this being just the beginning of ongoing work between the University of Chicago, with me, my students, with you all, with Dr. Guillaume's students, and here at Cerdotola. We have found this to be, I think, a wonderful place for collaboration, and we appreciate that the axes of your interests correspond with where our research is. So I wanted to talk really today about, this morning, start about the question that we've already raised with all the languages in the world. Why care about language endangerment? Wouldn't it be better if we all spoke English and French, right? And one of the things that happened in 2014, there was an article in probably our biggest newspaper in the United States, the New York Times, about the Navajo Nation. The Navajos are the largest group of Native Americans. The Navajo Nation was looking for a president. They were having a presidential election, and one of the candidates, this man here, wanted to run to be president, but he doesn't speak Navajo. So this started a large discussion in the Navajo Nation as to whether or not he would be eligible as president of the Navajo to be when he couldn't speak the language. One of the interesting things about Navajo is that for a long time in the United States, people thought that it was a safe language. You see, the population has 266,000 people, but only 171,000 people speak Navajo, and only 7,600 people are monolingual. So for a long time, many people had thought that Navajo was safe, and it was the only safe Native American language, that it was not going to be lost to English. It turned out that that was not true, that language loss has happened very quickly over the course of one generation, and we have lost native speakers of Navajo. Children speak English. Navajo is no longer seen as safe, and as a matter of fact, now it's believed by linguists that all Native American languages are seriously endangered and are likely to be lost. So one of the big responses to this language endangerment, the political situation that we've seen in the Navajo country, where there are discussions, can you be Navajo and not speak Navajo? Is language a key part of identity? Responses we see here is an Evenki school, a language I work with in Siberia. You can see, if you can, you probably can't read this. It says welcome in Russian here, and then it says welcome in Evenki, but the school itself and all the classes are conducted in Russian. However, we see people in other parts of the world really standing up. So in Guatemala, there's maybe 20 plus indigenous languages spoken, and right now there's very strong community support for revitalization. I'll be talking more about revitalization this afternoon, as you know, but it's kind of funny to talk about endangered languages and how people are reacting without mentioning revitalization, which is one of the biggest responses. And I thought, I like this picture very much. This is my student, Sam Boyd, who received his PhD in 2014. He's a native speaker of English, but he has learned Hebrew, and he's reading a very famous children's book, Goodnight Moon, in Hebrew to his baby. He allowed me to share this picture. Hebrew is probably the best named case of a language revitalization. And this is one of the big successes. He's here in the United States. We're reading a Hebrew book to his son in A Good Night Story. So why care? And this is the question I really want to focus on this morning. This is the question in the United States we get asked a lot. In Cameroon you have so many languages. Maybe it's obvious that you should care, and maybe it's not so obvious. But in the United States, despite the fact that we have many Native American languages, the general ideology is that we should all speak English. And people at large, not linguists, but the general public, think English is the best language in the world. The whole world should speak English. The world would be a better place. We could understand one another. So I want to say no, that that's not the case. So who cares? Speaker communities care. One big claim among linguists is that language and culture and identity are intertwined. This goes back to the Navajo Nation, the idea that you can't be really Navajo if you don't speak Navajo. And this is an ideology that is very strong in North America and Europe and elsewhere. I'm not sure that that's a strong ideology in Africa, and that's something I'm looking forward to conversations with you about. So linguists also, of course, care about language endangerment. First, I want to give you the view of endangerment as we talk about it in the United States. We'll look at the number of languages in the world, the distribution of speakers, geographic distribution of languages, and the issues of endangerment. So how many languages? If, as linguists, we are often asked by non-linguists, how many languages are there in the world? If you look in the ethnologue, the number is 7,106. funny number. So what's important to keep in mind that of all those languages, just 8 languages are spoken by 40% of the world. So say 7,100 languages are spoken by the rest of the world. 18.7% of all languages are spoken by 98.9% of the world's population. So if you do the math, 82.3%, or a total of 5,776 languages, are spoken by just 1.1% of the world. That means that there are a lot of languages spoken by very, very few people. Also, there is a major counting problem. So all of these numbers are very, very funny. I have been looking to see how many languages there are in Cameroon, and everywhere I look, I see a different number. So I know there are a lot, but I don't know how many, and part of it is I don't know where one language is a language and the thing spoken next to it is a different language or a dialect of that language. And who makes those decisions? Those are very complicated questions. We could do an entire workshop on that topic, and that would be a very interesting thing to do. In making the linguistic map, the linguistic atlas of Cameroon, certainly people come up with answers to those questions, but the answers are always somewhat theoretical. We don't have a good sense of it. But linguists estimate that we're going to lose at least half of the world's languages and maybe as many as 90% by the end of the century. It certainly seems that language loss is ongoing and has increased. And there are really 2 responses to this. One is documentation. Record the languages while you can. Get best records as possible while there are speakers. And the other is revitalisation. And I would say that those are the responses of linguists are documenting and revitalisation by communities, but there's a lot of interaction between those two, and that's what this workshop is about. So I just thought you should see the top 10 languages in terms of numbers of speakers. In the US, this is a surprising list. So I thought it would be interesting for you to know how people think in the US, since we have this very funny view. Of course, in the US, we're really proud of English, but you'll see English is number 3 in terms of number of speakers. That makes some people mad. Just, pride in language. Number 1 by the largest, absolute largest, here as you can see, is Mandarin Chinese. If you take all varieties of Chinese, it's about 1/6 of the world's speakers. Spanish is number 2. These numbers have to do with, the reason the languages are so large, maybe this goes without saying to linguists, is because of birth rates and colonialism. Colonizing languages spread because of colonization, not because they're better languages, but probably because their speakers had guns. That's simplistic, but there's some truth to it. So we see Spanish. English has the largest number of second language speakers. Then the rest of the list is quite surprising to most people. It's surprising that Hindi is number 4. You don't think about Hindi, and you probably don't think you need to speak Hindi to survive in the world. And this has to do with population and not with political power. Arabic, that number is a little bit wrong, because this includes all varieties of Arabic, which are probably more language-like than dialect-like. So let's put them together. Portuguese, this has to do with colonization again. It's Portuguese speakers in Brazil, not in Portugal. A surprise for everybody, Bengali. You're probably not thinking, oh, I need to learn Bengali. Russian, Japanese, and Javanese. What's very shocking in the United States, and I bet it's shocking here, is what's not on this list. French. And when I grew up in school, the language you were most likely to study as a foreign language was French. French was seen as the most important language. Now, it's Spanish. And that has to do with immigration. But my children went to a so-called bilingual school where, starting in the 4th grade, they learned French alongside English. All they did was take French in a French class, so they couldn't speak French very well, but they learned French, not Spanish. But that's not on this list, which is very surprising. It's really surprising. So, but those are the big 10. If we look at the world's languages, they're very unevenly distributed geographically. Africa has 32% of the world's languages. This is a hot spot for languages and linguistic diversity. For linguists, this is one of the most exciting places in the world to be. And Cameroon is certainly high up there. The Americas, only 15%. Notice that Europe has only 4% of the world's languages. And in the United States, again, this is a very shocking table because the languages that we are most likely to study in the United States as second languages are European languages. But the world's languages are spoken elsewhere. So it's a very interesting picture, and we see Africa and Asia as really multilingual centers where there's a lot of interesting work to be done. So for a linguist, this is paradise. So I wanted to give you, I'll come back to this. We'll be talking on and off and on today about the Arctic because that's where I do a lot of my field work. And I thought I would give you a view of this, and we'll look at some more maps this afternoon, just so you get a sense of how languages spread and where we have an area of very low language diversity and density. If it's high here in Cameroon, in this whole region here, there's a very low population and only about 50 languages spoken, and clearly that's because the weather is so bad. I was just saying I like cold climates, but this is the Arctic Circle. This is Greenland, and the reason it's white is that it's covered with ice. And so we have winter conditions here up in this area pretty much year-round, and very, very few languages spoken throughout that region. So let's talk a little bit about why we lose languages. These are some of the people I work with in Siberia. This is me. You can see they aren't very tall. So, and these are, she is wearing the native costume, which is made of, suede. And their handicrafts are all leather goods because they live in a part of the world where they don't even have in their languages words for fruits or vegetables. Nothing really grows. They are reindeer herders and traditionally hunters. So they are big meat eaters, and that's about all they eat. They come from, if you can get used to this part, this view of the world with the North Pole, they come from this part of Siberia. And they were colonized by Russians. Schools are in Russian now, and they speak Russian. The way that they see to become advanced is to speak Russian. And when I have worked with them and made books in their language, they say, we want something in English. They see English as the key to economic advancement, not their own language of English. So, what is it that we lose when we lose a language, and why should we care? I'm going to go through a few of these. This is, I think, an important thing for us as linguists to think about, because if you're going to be working with endangered languages, and I hope you will, the one thing we really need is more people doing this work. There's so many languages. We need answers for people as to why we should care.
So what do we lose? Linguists themselves care very much about the diversity in linguistic structures. So typologists want to know about the range of possibilities. One other reason is that understanding language is the key to understanding what's going on in the brain. Then there's these interesting questions about language and culture, and the role that language plays to culture, and language in society, and the role in society. So, typology. Why do we need more documentation of languages from a theoretical standpoint? One is to make generalizations about what language is about. If our generalizations and our studies of language are based only on English, English is the best studied language. And after English, we have other European languages are the best studied. But English and French are much more similar than English and Bassa, right? If we want to know the range of the world's languages, we need to look at different languages. And as we learn more about different languages, we will learn more about what human language can do. So Nettle and Romain said, to exclude exotic languages from our study is like expecting botanists to study only florist shop roses and greenhouse tomatoes and then have them tell us what the world is like. Right? We can't let these go. So one very good example of a language we need to know more about if we care about the history of people is Euskara or Basque. Do you know about Basque? Have you? So Basque is extremely interesting because it's not an Indo-European language. It is spoken in Spain and France. There's about 700,000 speakers. The Basque country was colonized by Spain on one side and France on the other side. There were very, very oppressive language policies under Franco in Spain, where people were punished and even killed for speaking Basque. It's because of this, for the last 20 to 25 years, it has become more and more endangered, and yet with the downfall of the Franco regime in Spain, there's been a huge interest in language revitalization. The reason as linguists we care about Basque, if you don't care about the emotional side and the thought of people being punished for speaking their language, is here we have Basque territory. So here's Spain and France. This little bit of red here is Basque. All the green are Indo-European languages. They're all genealogically related. Basque is an isolate. We don't know what it's related to. The yellow here are Finno-Ugric speaking. So we have Hungarian here, Finnish, and Sami languages, which are also not related to Indo-European. But it has been a really big puzzle who the Basques were related to and how did they get there. The hypothesis is that they were there before the Europeans moved into this territory. If we could understand where they came from, that's a key to understanding how people moved into Europe. There have been a lot of theories about what Basque is related to. Extinct languages in Europe, Caucasian languages spoken down here like Georgian. In India, Ainu, in Japan, ancient Egyptian, Na-Dene, we'll look at Na-Dene. No one knows what it's related to. So this is a good example of an endangered language that could be lost, may very well be lost, that holds some sort of information about human history. That would be very important. We have certainly lost other languages that it was related to, and without studying things, we just won't ever know. Another set of languages that I think is very interesting are the Yeniseian languages of Central Siberia and the Na-Dene languages of North America. So the Na-Dene language that you've probably heard of is Navajo. It's the biggest Na-Dene language. We have a group of Native American languages here. These people moved a lot. This is Alaska up here. They moved all the way down into here, so they covered a lot of territory. It's a very large language family. There's a hypothesis that they are related to a language spoken here in Siberia called Cette. I've looked at the evidence and I don't believe it. But the idea is that people started here and moved all this way across Siberia, if you wrap the world around, into Alaska and came here, that it was one group of people. And then the Na-Dene stayed here and the Cette are over here. I don't think that the linguistic evidence is compelling. There's no archaeological evidence. And this is, if you remember the other map of the Arctic, this is really cold. This is a bad area to travel through. It would be very hard for people to travel. So there's no archaeological evidence that they were there. The DNA evidence does not show that these people are related to these people. The whole argument for them being related rests on linguistic evidence. It's only through language data that we can reconstruct it right now. And it could be, we know languages and people don't have to move together because of marriage, because of just having children. You can spread the language. You can spread the language through contact without the people actually moving through trade, is what I mean. But the problem that we have here is those languages are severely endangered. There was a language family of maybe 5 languages. Only one is still spoken, and we don't have very good records. There was not documentation, so we don't have the linguistic data that we need to reconstruct the languages. So it's an example of something where if we had better data, we might have a better story. So I want to talk a little bit about things that we lose when we lose languages. Just to give you an idea of how I talk about this, and I don't know if you've thought about it this way. So one of the things that we lose are conceptual systems. And I think this is really important. We have these ideas that you can view the world in only one way, but there's lots of ways to view the world. So if you think about counting systems, maybe since you speak French, this wouldn't occur to you, but if you think about counting systems, most people think all number systems would be base 10. It makes sense. You got 10 fingers, right? That's the human condition. You have 10 fingers, you count to 10. And here's a good example of Slavic languages are base 10. So they're simple. French, I don't like French numbers. Neither does Patsy. But here, you can see 1 through 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We get up to 10. Then we have 10 is here. 12 is 2 and 10, 2 deset. 13 is 3 and 10, 3 deset. Right? You just keep going, going, going up to 100. 100, then you have 200, 300. It's all base 10. It's very great for math. Very simple. And this seems really logical. However, once you start looking at counting systems in the world's languages, and you have to get at the counting systems through language, that's the only way, right? It's not the only possibility. Some languages like base 5, which also makes perfect sense because you have 5 fingers. Some like base 20, fingers and toes, French. Right? Powers of 6, which makes no sense to me. But here's an example of popular. Why would you pick 6, right? 5 fingers in one head? I don't understand it. But here we have 6, then the next number, Nimbo, the next number is 36. And the next number is 216. And the next number is 1,296. If you just sat around thinking, what would people do, you would never guess that they would do that, right? So these are my favorites. I don't know if you've come, maybe you have some here in Cameroon. Body counting systems. Have you seen these ever? These are very complicated. They happen in a couple of different languages that I know of in Papua New Guinea. This is a base 27 system, which is also not convenient. So you start, in this system, you start with your thumb. You can't read it, but you start with your thumb. So the word for right thumb means 1. The word for right index finger is 2. So it's not, it's the word too. It's not just, there's a different issue of how you count. You go 1, 2, 1, 2. In Russian you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In English, I don't know what you do in English. But different people count, but it's not counting in your hands. It's meaning, I want a right thumb book, right? I want 1 book, right? So the thing here is what you do on this system, you start on your thumb, you count up here, and you get up to the middle, I think this is the nose on this picture, and then you go down the other side. So you can want left shoulder books, right? It's really bizarre. And then, of course, if you think about it, if you're going to be using body parts to count, you can do it in different ways. The systems that I know all start on the hands, but if it were me, it's not. I would start on my pinky, and some languages do. And they come up here and they rotate at this spot here, which I don't know what that is. I don't have a word for it. This is my collarbone. And then suppose you want to get to a higher number. I mean, a lot of these cultures don't want to get to higher numbers because they aren't doing big numbers anyways, right? They're doing sort of smaller local trade. But if you do, usually the system is you get to the far number and then go around again. You add a word that says go around again, so you come back the other way. And so it's like left wrist go around again is a certain number. So again, if you didn't know that people did this, you wouldn't think that people would do this, right? You just wouldn't, it wouldn't occur to you. And needless to say, I think if you think about this, it makes sense. The number systems are being lost more quickly than the languages themselves, for the obvious reason that where you have contact. So in Papua New Guinea, English and Tok-Pisin, a pidgin, are coming in. In South America, where you get some of these, Spanish, but where the first contact is with trade. And so in trade, they're using Spanish numbers or English numbers. So those are the things that get lost. I wanted to talk a little bit about sounds, and one of the things that we lose very quickly is a sense of the range of sound inventories. This may be something that you talk about in your linguistics classes here because it's such an African issue. This is the place to come for sounds, one of the places. The Caucasus and Alaska are also great places for sounds. But we know that sound inventories, phonemic inventories, can range greatly. We have vowel inventories ranging from a low of 2 vowels. The most common system is 5 vowel phonemes, very few vowels. So English is strange in this respect. The high end is 14. You know what language that is? German. That's out of this sample. The sample's only 564 languages, so I think that it could be wrong. It's a very small percentage. Range in consonants, the average is in the low 20s. The low end in Papua New Guinea is 6 consonants, and it won't surprise you. It surprises people in the US who aren't linguists that the high end of the inventory are in the click languages. They are spoken are, from a linguistic standpoint, in terms of phonemic inventories, among the most interesting. Betsy specializes in sounds, and she might include other languages in the most interesting, but clicks are up there. I don't do clicks. I'm not very good at them, but this is from the phonemic inventory of Zhuangzi, and I have a friend in the United States who specializes in Zhuangzi, and so I've talked to her about this. It's got 48 different click placements, which is a huge amount. And I'm going to play you a quick video clip. Do you study click languages here? Okay, then people in the U.S. love to look at this. And so this is a clip. A man is speaking. Unfortunately, it's not transcribed, but my friend Amanda Miller translated it for me. And so she says, at first he's talking about collecting grass, and then going to rest at his house and waiting for the rain to fall. After the rain falls, he will come back and put grass in the top of an ostrich eggshell that is filled with water to close it off. So we're going to look at this clip. We'll see if you can see if it loads. I think that's totally cool. Want to hear it again? So these languages are all linked into. They are totally cool, and you could learn them. Amanda Miller, I should point out, she's white. Actually, she's born in the U.S. and she's white, and she went there and she can understand what he's saying. So I think that's cool. I'll show you one of the things that's interesting is I have a hypothesis about these clicks spreading. And I'm not the only one who has this hypothesis, but I am researching. This is part of our collaborative research, and I will show you some clips of clicks in a second. My daughter lived in Senegal for 2 years, so here we're going up to Senegal, and we are going. I don't know how good your geography is. In the U.S., nobody knows geography. So she was living outside of Cerdotola, here just south of Mauritania. And she speaks Wolof. Her Wolof is very good. But when I went there to visit her, here she is. She is here with us in Cameroon. She is part of the team. She's an economist. So here she is. She lived there in the village for 2 years. I also brought 2 other students. This is part of the village is Pular, but the village is mainly Wolof speaking. The main part of the village is Wolof, and the Pulars live off to the side. They do not